The sky burned red as Commander Ethan Marlowe dragged himself over the ridge. Blood trailed behind him, a dark serpentine path marking his desperate journey across the scorched earth. His right leg was mangled. Shrapnel had torn through muscle and sinew during the ambush that had decimated his unit. 12 hours ago, he'd been leading 37 men and women. Now he was alone, the screams of his comrades still echoing in his mind. The invasion had come without warning. The ships had appeared in the sky 3 months ago, massive obsidian structures that blotted out the sun. They'd hovered silent and motionless for days while humanity held its collective breath. Then came the devastation. Waves of energy that toppled cities, followed by ground forces that hunted survivors with terrifying efficiency. Ethan's unit had been one of the last organized resistance cells in the region. Their mission had been simple: gather intelligence on a suspected alien command post established in the remains of the White Crest Research Facility. They'd never even made it to their destination. Should have seen the ambush coming, Ethan muttered through cracked lips as he surveyed the desolate canyon stretching before him. The terrain was unrecognizable from the maps he'd studied. Where lush forests had once stood, only blackened stumps remained. The river that had carved this canyon over millennia was now a trickle of murky, contaminated water. The air smelled of sulfur and ash. Each breath scorched his lungs, but he kept moving. Stopping meant death. His combat training had drilled that into him since day one. Keep moving, find shelter, assess injuries, plan next steps. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the blasted landscape. In the distance, through the haze of smoke that perpetually hung in the air, Ethan could make out the skeletal remains of what might have been the research facility, his original destination. It would have to do for shelter. His pack held minimal supplies: half a canteen of water, a combat knife, a flare gun with 2 rounds, and a first aid kit that was woefully inadequate for his injuries. The comms unit had been destroyed in the attack, leaving him cut off from any remaining resistance forces. Night fell quickly, the darkness almost absolute without the glow of civilization that had once illuminated the sky. Only the stars and a thin crescent moon provided any light. Ethan moved slowly but steadily toward the facility, using the pain to keep himself alert. Each step was agony, but each step was also one closer to potential shelter. The research facility loomed before him after 3 hours of grueling progress. Once a state-of-the-art complex dedicated to advanced energy research, it now stood as a monument to humanity's fall. The main building was partially collapsed, but several sections appeared intact enough to provide cover. As Ethan approached, a noise stopped him cold. A soft scraping sound from within the darkness of what had once been the main entrance. He dropped to a crouch despite the searing pain in his leg, drawing his knife with practiced precision. The blade seemed pitifully inadequate against the weapons he'd seen the invaders wield, but it was all he had. "If you're going to kill me," he called out, his voice hoarse but steady, "you could at least have the decency to face me." Silence answered him for several long moments. Then came movement, fluid and graceful in a way that seemed almost impossible in the ruined environment. A figure emerged from the shadows, and Ethan's grip tightened on his knife. She was tall, nearly 7 feet, with proportions that were almost human but not quite right. Her limbs were too long, her movements too precise. She wore what appeared to be armor, a translucent material that caught what little moonlight filtered through the haze and reflected it in subtle prismatic patterns. But it was her face that held Ethan transfixed. Gray skin stretched over sharp, angular features. Her eyes were large, luminous green orbs that seemed to glow from within. Not one of the invaders, then. They were massive, hulking creatures with exoskeletons like obsidian beetles. This was someone else entirely. "You are injured," she said. Her voice was melodic but strangely accented, as though speaking English required configurations her vocal apparatus wasn't designed for. "Brilliant observation," Ethan replied, not lowering his knife. "What are you?" The alien woman tilted her head in a curiously human gesture. "I am Selin Avarice, last guardian of the Nexari Covenant." She paused, studying him. "You are human military, commander, based on your insignia." "What's left of one," Ethan said. "Commander Ethan Marlowe, United Earth Defense Force." He swayed slightly, blood loss and exhaustion taking their toll. "If you're going to kill me, make it quick. I've seen enough slow deaths today." Celine stepped closer, and Ethan noticed she moved with an eerie silence, her feet barely seeming to touch the ground. I am not your enemy, Commander Marlowe. The Kryvax are our enemy as well. The Kryvax? The ones who darken your skies, the destroyers. They came to our world before yours. She gestured toward the ruined facility. I can offer you shelter and treatment for your wounds, if you will accept it. Ethan weighed his options, which were admittedly few. He could remain outside and likely bleed to death, or he could follow this unknown entity and possibly face a different but equally fatal outcome. Or perhaps, just perhaps, he might survive. Lead the way, he said finally, lowering his knife but not sheathing it. Sillin turned without another word and moved back toward the entrance. Ethan followed, limping heavily, the pain in his leg now a constant, screaming presence. Inside, the research facility was a maze of collapsed corridors and exposed wiring. Celine navigated the ruins with confidence, suggesting familiarity with the layout. She led him deeper into the complex, down a stairwell that had somehow remained intact, and into what appeared to have been a laboratory. Unlike the destruction above, this room was relatively untouched. Equipment hummed softly, emergency lights cast a pale blue glow over pristine workstations, and in the center stood a containment unit that pulsed with a subtle, rhythmic light. What is this place? Ethan asked, leaning against a wall for support. The humans here were studying energy transfer, Celine replied, moving to a cabinet and retrieving what looked like medical supplies. They did not know they were studying principles my people mastered millennia ago. She gestured for him to sit on a nearby examination table. After a moment's hesitation, Ethan complied. His leg had gone from screaming pain to an ominous numbness, which he knew from field medicine training was a very bad sign. Celine approached with a small device that resembled a handheld scanner. This will assess the extent of your injuries. Are you a doctor? Ethan asked as she passed the device over his damaged leg. I am many things, she replied cryptically. Healer is one of them. The scanner emitted a soft tone, and Celine's expression, already alien and difficult to read, grew somber. The damage is extensive, vascular system compromised, neural pathways severed, bone integrity failing. Conventional treatment would not be sufficient. So I'm dying, Ethan said flatly. It wasn't a question. Yes, Celine confirmed with a directness he found oddly refreshing. Within hours. Ethan nodded, a strange calm settling over him. Well, at least I'll have company at the end, better than dying alone in that canyon. Celine regarded him with those luminous green eyes. There is an alternative, Commander Marlowe. An alternative to dying? That's called living, and it doesn't sound like that's an option at this point. She moved to the containment unit at the center of the room and placed her hand on its surface. The pulsing light within intensified, responding to her touch. My people were not simply killed by the Kryvax. We were consumed, our essence harvested for their purposes. She turned back to him. I am the last of the Nexari in physical form, but I am not all that remains. The containment unit opened with a soft hiss, revealing a small vial filled with an iridescent liquid that seemed to move of its own accord, swirling and shifting even though the vial remained perfectly still. What is that? Ethan asked, a note of wariness entering his voice. The distilled essence of my fallen kin, Celine said softly. Their knowledge, their adaptability, their very being, preserved. She lifted the vial carefully, holding it up to the dim light. This was to be used for our rebirth, but that time will never come now. Instead, it may serve another purpose. Which is? Integration with another species. Symbiosis. She looked directly at him. It would heal your body, Commander. More than heal, it would transform it. Ethan stared at the swirling liquid. Into what? Something neither human nor Nexari. Something new. Her voice grew softer. But I must warn you, if you drink this, you will never be human again. Ethan laughed, a harsh sound in the quiet laboratory. Look around you. Humanity's days are numbered anyway. What's one more casualty in this war? This is not a decision to make lightly, Celine cautioned. The essence will not simply heal your body, it will alter your consciousness, your perception. The boundaries between Ethan Marlowe and the Nexari consciousness will blur. Ethan looked down at his mangled leg. at the blood-soaked fabric of his uniform, and thought of his unit, all gone now. He thought of the cities he'd seen fall, the civilization crumbling around him. What did it mean to remain human in a world where humanity was being systematically exterminated? Will I still be me? He asked finally. Will I remember who I am, what I'm fighting for? You will remember, Seelan said, but you will also be more. The essence contains the memories and knowledge of many Nexari. They will become part of you as you will become part of them. She held out the vial. It is your choice, Commander Marlowe. Die as a human or live as something else. Ethan reached for the vial without further hesitation. His fingers closed around it, feeling a strange warmth emanating from the glass. If I'm going to die anyway, he said, I might as well try the option that lets me take a few more of those Kryvax bastards with me. He uncapped the vial and raised it in a mock toast. To new beginnings. Before Seelan could offer any further warning or explanation, Ethan brought the vial to his lips and drank the contents in a single swallow. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. The liquid burned down his throat like fire, spreading outward through his chest and limbs in pulsing waves. Ethan fell back on the examination table, his body convulsing as the essence suffused every cell. He screamed, a sound of agony and transformation that echoed through the abandoned laboratory. His vision blurred, then sharpened to an impossible clarity. Colors he had no names for blossomed in his perception. Sounds beyond the range of human hearing suddenly became audible. The hum of equipment, the subtle vibration of the earth, even the quiet respiration of Celine standing nearby. And then came the voices, not audible but present in his mind. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of distinct consciousnesses, speaking in languages he shouldn't understand but somehow did. Memories not his own flooded his awareness. Cities of crystal and light. Wars fought with weapons of thought. Knowledge accumulated over millennia. Through it all, Ethan fought to maintain his sense of self. He clung to his name, his identity, his memories. The farm where he'd grown up, his parents' faces, the day he'd enlisted, the friends he'd made and lost. He held these things like talismans against the tide of alien consciousness threatening to sweep him away. How long the process lasted, he couldn't say. Time seemed to stretch and contract, becoming meaningless. When awareness finally returned in a form he could comprehend, Ethan found himself lying on the floor of the laboratory, Seelan kneeling beside him. You survived, she said, and he detected something like surprise in her voice. Many would not have. Ethan sat up slowly, expecting pain that didn't come. He looked down at his leg. The mangled flesh had knitted itself together, leaving not even a scar as evidence of the grievous wound. He flexed his fingers, feeling strength beyond anything he'd known before. What happened? He asked, and was startled by his own voice. It still sounded like him, but there was a resonance to it that hadn't been there before, a depth that seemed to vibrate in the air. The integration was successful, Celine replied. Your body has been remade, strengthened. The damage has been repaired, and more. Ethan stood, marveling at the fluid ease of movement. His senses remained heightened. He could see dust motes dancing in the air, hear the subtle shift of the building around them, smell the complex chemical composition of the atmosphere. And the voices in his mind had not disappeared. They had quieted to a background murmur, like conversation in another room, but they were still present. Knowledge he couldn't possibly possess floated to the surface of his thoughts. The molecular structure of the alloy comprising the examination table, mathematical equations of staggering complexity, the name of a star system he'd never heard of. They're still here, he said, tapping his temple. In my mind. Celine nodded. They will always be with you now. In time, you will learn to access their knowledge selectively, to quiet them when necessary and call upon them when needed. Ethan took a step forward, then another, testing this new body that was his but not entirely his. I feel powerful, he admitted, but also not entirely in control. That will pass, Celine assured him. The integration is new. Your consciousness and theirs are still finding equilibrium. A sudden noise from above interrupted them, a low mechanical hum that Ethan recognized immediately. Kryvax drones, he said, his body tensing automatically. Celine moved swiftly to a console, activating a screen that showed the exterior of the facility. 3 beetle-like machines hovered near the entrance. their sensory arrays scanning methodically. They're searching for survivors, Ethan said, knowledge from both his military training and the Nexary consciousness informing his assessment. Standard sweep pattern. Yes, Celine agreed. They likely detected your biometric signature before the transformation. Now they seek to confirm. Ethan's mind raced, processing tactical options with newfound speed and clarity. There are others here, aren't there? Human survivors hiding in the lower levels. Celine's expression revealed nothing, but her silence was confirmation enough. How many? Ethan pressed. 23, she said finally. Researchers and security personnel who survived the initial attack. They sheltered in the containment levels below. Ethan nodded, already formulating a plan. Those drones will call in strike force if they detect life signs. We need to eliminate them quickly and quietly. And how do you propose to do that? Celine asked. You have only a knife and they are armed with disintegration beams. Ethan smiled, a predatory expression that felt natural on his face. I have more than a knife now. He flexed his hands, feeling the new strength coursing through them. I have knowledge of their weak points, thanks to your people's memories. And I have the element of surprise. He moved toward the stairs leading up. Keep the survivors below. I'll handle the drones. Commander, Celine called after him. Your transformation is still stabilizing. Exertion may trigger unpredictable results. Noted, Ethan replied without slowing. But those drones need to be dealt with now. He ascended the stairs with preternatural silence, his movements guided by instincts that weren't entirely his own. The ruins of the facility, which had been difficult to navigate in the darkness before, now appeared to him in perfect clarity. His enhanced vision perceived heat signatures, electromagnetic fields, structural weaknesses, data flooding his awareness that he somehow processed without becoming overwhelmed. Near the main entrance, he paused, listening. The mechanical hum of the drones was closer now. One had entered the building, its metal appendages scraping occasionally against debris as it navigated the collapsed corridors. The other two remained outside, maintaining a perimeter. Ethan closed his eyes, drawing on the Nexary knowledge that now resided within him. The drone's design flashed in his mind, their sensor arrays, power sources, communication modules. He knew exactly where to strike. The first drone hovered into view, a spherical body approximately 1 meter in diameter, supported by 6 articulated limbs that allowed it to crawl over obstacles when flight wasn't optimal. Its surface bristled with sensors and a single weapon port on its underside. It moved methodically, scanning each section of the ruined corridor. Ethan remained perfectly still, controlling even his breathing as the drone approached. The Nexary consciousness whispered that the machine's sensors were primarily focused on detecting motion and heat signatures. By regulating his body temperature, a capability he shouldn't have had but now did, he could appear as part of the ambient environment. When the drone was less than 3 meters away, Ethan made his move. He lunged forward with impossible speed, one hand grasping a stabilizing limb, while the other drove his combat knife directly into the narrow gap between the drone's sensor cluster and its main body. The blade penetrated the delicate circuitry within, and the drone emitted a high-pitched whine before its lights flickered and died. Ethan lowered the now inactive machine silently to the floor. 1 down, 2 to go. He moved to a shattered window that overlooked the facility's entrance. The remaining drones hovered just outside, their search patterns momentarily disrupted by the loss of communication with their companion. Ethan surveyed his surroundings, looking for a weapon more effective than his knife. His enhanced vision spotted something promising, a broken piece of metal strut, about 1 meter long with a jagged end. He retrieved it silently, testing its weight and balance. It would serve as a makeshift spear. The next part of his plan was riskier. He would need to draw his drones inside where he could engage them in close quarters. Their disintegration beams were lethal at range, but they had minimum effective distances, another piece of knowledge supplied by the Nexary consciousness. Ethan picked up a chunk of concrete and hurled it through another window on the opposite side of the entrance. The sound of breaking glass had the desired effect. Both drones immediately oriented toward the noise and began moving to investigate. As they entered the building, Ethan positioned himself above the doorway, bracing between 2 exposed support beams. The drones passed beneath him, their sensors sweeping the area ahead, but not above. Ethan dropped onto the first drone, driving the jagged metal spear through its central processing unit. The machine crashed to the floor, sparking and twitching. The second drone reacted instantly, swiveling to target him, its weapon port glowing with building energy. Time seemed to slow for Ethan as the Nexari essence enhanced his neural processing. He rolled away from the disabled drone, calculating the beam's trajectory even as he moved. The disintegration ray fired, missing him by centimeters and vaporizing a section of floor where he had been an instant before. Before the drone could recharge for another shot, Ethan was in motion again. He leaped toward a collapsed section of wall, using it as a springboard to launch himself directly at the drone from an unexpected angle. His hands closed around its sensor array, and with strength that would have been impossible for a normal human, he wrenched it free from the drone's body. The machine spiraled erratically, firing its beam in a random direction that carved a smoking furrow along one wall. Ethan landed in a crouch, then immediately sprang again, this time driving his knife into the drone's exposed interior through the gap left by the removed sensor array. The drone emitted a shrill electronic screech, then dropped to the floor, its systems failing. Ethan stood over it, breathing heavily not from exertion, but from the rush of combat. The fight had lasted less than 30 seconds. "Impressive," came Celine's voice from the stairwell. She emerged from the shadows, regarding him with those luminous green eyes. "The integration has enhanced your physical capabilities beyond what I anticipated." Ethan looked down at his hands, still gripping the knife that had punctured alien technology designed to withstand conventional weapons. "It's not just physical," he said. "I knew exactly where to strike, how their systems worked. I could see it all in my mind." "The Nexari were a warrior race before they were philosophers," Celine explained. "That knowledge is part of what you've inherited." Ethan nodded slowly, then tensed as he detected movement from below, footsteps approaching cautiously from the lower levels. "The survivors," Celine confirmed. "They heard the commotion." A moment later, a group of humans appeared at the far end of the corridor. They moved with the caution of prey animals, weapons improvised from laboratory equipment held ready. At their head was a tall woman with close-cropped gray hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to authority. "Celine?" the woman called, her voice wary. "What's happening up here?" "Krivak's drones," Celine replied. "They have been neutralized." The woman's gaze shifted to Ethan, taking in his military uniform and the knife in his hand. "By him?" "Yes," Celine said simply. The group approached slowly and Ethan could read their expressions clearly, relief at the eliminated threat, but wariness of him, the unknown quantity. He sheathed his knife in a deliberate, non-threatening motion. "Commander Ethan Marlowe, United Earth Defense Force," he introduced himself. "What's left of it, anyway?" The gray-haired woman nodded. "Dr. Elaine Voorhees, Research Director. This facility was under my supervision before the invasion." She gestured to the others behind her. "My staff and security team. Those of us who made it to the containment levels when the attack came." Ethan took in the group, scientists still wearing lab coats now stained and torn, security personnel with standard-issue sidearms that would be woefully inadequate against Krivak's forces. Survivors like him, clinging to existence in a world turned upside down. "The drones were searching for life signs," Ethan explained. "They would have called in strike forces if they'd found you. You're not safe here anymore." "We're not safe anywhere," one of the scientists muttered. "Perhaps," Ethan conceded. "But there are resistance cells operating in the Razorback Mountains to the north. If we can reach them, we'd have a better chance than waiting here to be discovered." Dr. Voorhees studied him with shrewd eyes. "You handled 3 Krivak's drones with nothing but a knife. That's not standard UEDF capability." Ethan exchanged a glance with Celine. "I've had some enhancements." "He drank the Nexari essence," Celine stated bluntly. "He has changed." A murmur ran through the group, and Ethan saw their expressions shift from wariness to something closer to fear. One of the security officers raised his weapon slightly. "That stuff from the containment unit?" Dr. Voorhees asked, her voice sharp. "The alien biological material we were studying?" "It saved his life," Celine said, "and he used that gift to save yours." Ethan could feel their fear like a physical sensation. Another new ability, apparently. He raised his hand slowly. "I'm still me," he said, though even as he spoke the words, he questioned their truth. "I'm still fighting for humanity. That hasn't changed." Dr. Voorhees held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded. "We don't have the luxury of turning away help, whatever its source." She turned to the others. "Gather what supplies you can. food, water, medical kits. We move out in 20 minutes. As the group dispersed to prepare, Voorhees approached Ethan more closely. Commander, she said quietly, I need to know exactly what that substance did to you. As a scientist and as the person responsible for these people. Ethan considered how to explain something he himself was still coming to understand. It healed me, for starters. I had a leg wound that would have killed me within hours. And the other effects? Enhanced strength, speed, senses, access to knowledge I shouldn't have. He tapped his temple. And voices, Nexari consciousness, memories, experiences. Are you in control? She asked bluntly. Or are they? It was the question Ethan had been asking himself since the transformation. I'm in control, he said with more confidence than he felt. But I'm more than I was before. It's like having access to additional processing power, additional experience. Dr. Voorhees nodded slowly. We were studying the substance as a potential medical breakthrough, neural regeneration specifically. We had no idea it contained sentient consciousness. The Kryvax knew, Selin interjected, approaching silently. That is why they attacked this facility specifically. They sought to prevent humans from accessing Nexari knowledge. Why? Ethan asked. What were they afraid we'd learn? How to defeat them, Selin said simply. The Nexari fought the Kryvax for generations before falling. We accumulated knowledge of their weaknesses, their strategies, knowledge that now resides within you, Commander Marlowe. Ethan felt the weight of this revelation settle on him. He wasn't just a soldier with enhanced abilities. He was a repository of information that could potentially turn the tide of a war humanity was losing. Then we need to get to the resistance, he said firmly. Share what I know with those who can use it. Dr. Voorhees nodded. The Razorback Mountains are nearly 100 kilometers from here, through territory the Kryvax control. We'll make it, Ethan said with certainty. We have to. 20 minutes later, the group was ready to move out. They had assembled what supplies they could salvage from the facility. Water purification tablets, preserved food rations, medical supplies, and a few weapons. Not enough for comfort, but hopefully enough for survival. Ethan took point, his enhanced senses allowing him to detect threats well before they became immediate dangers. Selin walked beside him, her own alien perceptions complementing his. Behind them came the scientists and security personnel, moving as quietly as civilians could manage. As they left the relative safety of the research facility and ventured into the devastated landscape beyond, Ethan felt a strange dual perspective settle over him. Part of him, the human soldier, saw a ruined world that had once been his home. Another part, the Nexari consciousness, saw a battlefield in a war that had spanned star systems and millennia. Both parts agreed on one thing. This fight was far from over. The group traveled by night, taking advantage of Ethan and Selin's superior night vision to navigate the treacherous terrain. By day, they sheltered in caves or the ruins of structures, always maintaining watches, always ready to move at the first sign of Kryvax patrols. On the third day, as they rested in the hollowed-out remains of what had once been a small hydroelectric plant, Ethan found himself staring at his reflection in a fragment of broken glass. His face was still recognizably his own, but subtle changes had manifested. His eyes had developed a faint luminescence similar to Selin's, visible in dim light. The veins beneath his skin occasionally showed a slight iridescence when his heart rate increased. The physical changes will continue, Selin said, approaching silently to stand beside him, though they will remain subtle for some time. And the mental changes? Ethan asked. The voices are getting louder, more insistent. They sense conflict approaching, Selin explained. The Nexari essence responds to threat and opportunity. It is preparing you. Ethan turned from his reflection. Preparing me for what? For what you must become to lead this fight. Before Ethan could respond, one of the security officers, Jackson, a former police tactical team member, approached with urgency in his stride. Commander, he said, we've got movement to the east. Lots of it. Ethan followed him to a vantage point overlooking the valley below. With his enhanced vision, he could clearly see what had alarmed Jackson. A Kryvax ground force was moving through the valley, at least 30 drone units accompanied by 5 of the larger combat forms. The latter were 2.5-meter tall, insectoid creatures with chitinous armor and multiple limbs tipped with natural weapons or technological attachments. They're heading toward Haven Ridge, Dr. Voorhees said, joining them at the observation point. She indicated the direction with a nod. The last major human settlement in this region, population of about 15,000, last we heard. Or a staging area for their next push, Ethan murmured, tactical assessments flooding his mind. If they secure Haven Ridge, they control the entire eastern seaboard. We need to warn them, Jackson insisted. With what? Dr. Voorhees countered. We have no long-range communications equipment. Ethan studied the Kryvax formation, the Nexary knowledge supplying details about their likely objectives and strategies. They're moving fast, but not at full speed. This is a measured advance, not an all-out assault. They're probably establishing forward positions before bringing in their heavy forces. Which means we have time, Celine observed. Some, Ethan agreed, but not much. A memory surfaced in his mind, not his own, but one of the Nexaries. A similar situation on another world, another time. A small force disrupting a larger one through targeted strikes at command and control nodes. We can stop them, he said suddenly, the plan crystallizing in his thoughts. Stop them, Jackson repeated incredulously. Commander, there are 35 of them and 24 of us, most civilians with improvised weapons. Numbers aren't everything, Ethan replied. The Kryvax operate on a hierarchical command structure. Take out their leader, and the rest fall into disarray long enough for a proper counterattack to be organized. He pointed to a formation of rocky outcroppings several kilometers ahead of the Kryvax force. They'll pass through that ravine. The terrain will force them to bunch up, limit their maneuverability. We can set an ambush. With what weapons? Dr. Voorhees asked skeptically. Ethan smiled grimly. We have more than you think. He turned to one of the scientists, a thin man named Foster, who had specialized in energy systems research. The facility was working on directed energy weapons before the invasion, wasn't it? Portable prototype models. Foster's eyes widened. Yes, but they were experimental, unstable. The power regulation systems couldn't handle sustained output. We don't need sustained output, Ethan said. We need one good shot at their command unit. Even if we had those prototypes, they were left behind at the facility, Foster pointed out. Not all of them, Dr. Voorhees interjected quietly. She met Ethan's gaze. I had one in my personal lab. It's in my pack. I thought it might be useful, but the power cell is nearly depleted. Show me, Ethan said. Dr. Voorhees retrieved the device from her pack, a compact unit that resembled a bulky handgun with additional components attached to its frame. Ethan turned it over in his hands, the Nexary knowledge immediately analyzing its construction and function. The design is inefficient, he said, but serviceable. The power regulation issue is in the field emitter coil. A slight recalibration would allow for one concentrated discharge before failure. Foster stared at him. How could you possibly know that? It took us years to develop that prototype. He has Nexary knowledge now, Celine reminded them. Their understanding of energy systems far exceeded humanity's. Ethan was already disassembling the weapon with practice movements that his human training had never included. His fingers moved with precision, adjusting components, rerouting power flow paths. This will work for one shot, he explained as he worked. After that, the emitter will burn out completely. But one shot is all we need if it's placed correctly. And what's the target? Jackson asked. Their command unit, Ethan replied, indicating the largest of the combat forms. The one with the additional sensory apparatus. Take that out, and the others will be temporarily directionless. Temporarily, Dr. Voorhees emphasized. And then what? And then we run, Ethan said simply. By the time they reorganize, we'll be gone, and Haven Ridge will be warned. The plan took shape quickly after that. They would split into 3 groups. Ethan, Celine, and 2 of the security personnel would take position on the high ground overlooking the ravine. They would have the modified energy weapon and would be responsible for eliminating the command unit. A second group led by Jackson would create a diversion at the far end of the ravine to draw attention away from the main attack. The third group, consisting of Dr. Voorhees and the remaining civilians, would be positioned for a quick departure once the command unit was destroyed. As night fell, they moved into position. The rocky terrain provided ample cover, and Ethan's enhanced senses allowed him to track the Kryvax forces' approach with precision. He lay prone on a ledge overlooking the ravine, the modified energy weapon braced before him. They're sticking to the projected route, he murmured to Celine, who lay beside him. 3 minutes until they enter the ravine. The weapon is ready, Shiem. Asked. Ethan nodded. One shot, it has to count. Below, the first of the drone units entered the ravine, their mechanical limbs finding purchase on the uneven ground. The larger combat forms followed, moving with an unsettling grace despite their size. The command unit was easy to identify, nearly half a meter taller than its companions, with additional sensor arrays protruding from its carapace. "Wait for my signal," Ethan said into the portable communicator they'd salvaged from the facility. Jackson's acknowledgement came as a terse click over the channel. The Kryvax force moved deeper into the ravine. Ethan tracked the command unit through the weapon's crude targeting system, his enhanced perception compensating for its limitations. The voices of the Nexari consciousness surged in his mind, 1,000 battle strategies and experiences flooding his awareness. He let them come, drawing on their knowledge while maintaining his own focus. When the command unit reached the narrowest point of the ravine, Ethan gave the signal. Now. At the far end of the ravine, Jackson's team detonated the improvised explosives they'd created from chemicals found at the hydroelectric plant. The blast wasn't large, but in the confined space of the ravine, the sound reverberated like thunder. The Kryvax force immediately oriented toward the disturbance, the drones surging forward while the combat forms established a defensive perimeter. In that moment of distraction, Ethan took his shot. The modified energy weapon discharged with a high-pitched whine, releasing its entire power reserve in a single concentrated burst. A beam of searing white light lanced down from his position, striking the command unit at the junction between its head and thorax, precisely where the Nexari knowledge had indicated its central neural cluster would be located. The effect was more dramatic than Ethan had anticipated. The command unit didn't simply fall, it exploded in a burst of caustic fluid and shattered chitin. Secondary explosions rippled through its technological implants, catching two nearby drones in the blast radius. The remaining Kryvax forces reacted with immediate confusion. The drones circled erratically, their coordinated search patterns disintegrating into random movement. The combat forms adopted defensive stances but made no coherent advance or retreat. "It worked," Celine said, surprise evident in her voice. "Their auxiliary command protocols haven't activated yet." "They will soon," Ethan replied, already moving back from the ledge. "We need to be gone before that happens." They retreated swiftly to the rendezvous point where Dr. Voorhees waited with the others. Jackson's team arrived minutes later, breathless but triumphant. "Did you see that explosion?" Jackson exclaimed. "The whole ravine lit up." "I saw," Ethan confirmed, "but we need to move. They'll regroup eventually, and when they do, they'll hunt for whoever did this." The group moved out immediately, pushing their pace despite the fatigue that dogged the civilians among them. Ethan led them along a route that took advantage of terrain features to mask their trail, another skill he shouldn't have possessed, but now did. By dawn, they had put significant distance between themselves and the ravine. They took shelter in a deep cave system, posting watches while the others rested. Ethan found himself unable to sleep, the voices of the Nexari consciousness still agitated from the combat. He sat at the cave entrance, watching the sun rise over the blasted landscape. Celine joined him after a while, her silent approach now familiar enough that it no longer startled him. "You're changing faster than I expected," she observed. "The tactical knowledge, the technical understanding of the weapon, the combat instincts, these are deep integrations that should have taken weeks to manifest." Ethan nodded. "I feel it. Every hour, more knowledge becomes accessible, more capabilities unlock." He flexed his hand, watching the subtle iridescence that now played beneath his skin when he exerted himself. "It's like I'm becoming a living weapon." "That was always the potential of the essence," Celine said. "But there is danger in rapid integration. The boundary between your consciousness and theirs may become indistinct." "You mean I could lose myself," Ethan stated flatly, "become more Nexari than human?" "It is a possibility," she admitted. "The essence seeks optimization. In a combat situation, that means prioritizing tactical efficiency over individual identity." Ethan was silent for a long moment. "When I took that shot," he finally said, "part of me felt satisfaction at destroying the command unit, but another part felt recognition, like I was eliminating the hated enemy I'd fought countless times before." "The Nexari and Kryvax war spanned generations," Celine explained. "That hatred runs deep in the collective memory you now share." "Is that why you warned me?" Ethan asked. "When you gave me the essence, You said I would never be human again. Yes, Celine said simply. The change is not merely physical. It is a transformation of being. Ethan looked out at the sunrise again. I made my choice, he said firmly, and I'll keep making it. Every day, every hour. I'll use what the essence gives me, but I won't let it erase who I am. Celine regarded him with those luminous green eyes. That determination may be what allows you to succeed where others would fail. Their conversation was interrupted by Jackson's approach. Commander, he said, Dr. Voorhees wants to speak with you. She says it's important. Ethan nodded and followed Jackson deeper into the cave where the others were resting. Dr. Voorhees was hunched over a small device that Ethan recognized as a communication scanner, standard issue for research outposts to monitor emergency broadcasts. I picked up a transmission, she explained without preamble. Fragmented but clear enough. The resistance in the Razorbacks has established a staging area near Haven Ridge. They're gathering forces for a counteroffensive. Against what? Ethan asked. That's the concerning part, Dr. Voorhees replied. According to the transmission, the Kryvacs are bringing in something big. They called it a Harbinger-class vessel. It's apparently a command and control ship, much larger than anything they've deployed so far. Ethan felt a cold certainty settle in his gut, knowledge from the Nexari consciousness rising to the surface. A Harbinger means they're preparing for a final sweep of the region. They'll sterilize everything from the coast to the mountains. Sterilize? Jackson repeated, his voice tight. Complete elimination of all life forms, Selin clarified. The Kryvacs do not leave potential threats behind, even dormant ones. How long do we have? Ethan asked. Dr. Voorhees shook her head. The transmission didn't specify. Days, maybe. Not weeks. Ethan considered their options. The original plan had been to reach the resistance in the Razorback Mountains, but with a Harbinger incoming, that might no longer be viable. The resistance forces would be focused on evacuation, not welcoming new refugees. We need to reach Haven Ridge, he decided. If there's going to be a counteroffensive, they'll need every advantage they can get, including what I know about the Kryvacs. It's at least 3 days' journey at our current pace, Jackson pointed out, through increasingly hostile territory. Then we'll have to move faster, Ethan replied, and smarter. The group set out again as soon as dusk fell, now with a renewed sense of urgency. Ethan pushed the pace harder than before, his enhanced senses constantly scanning for threats. They traveled cross-country, avoiding roads and open areas where Kryvacs patrols might spot them. On the second night, disaster struck. They were crossing a shallow river when drones appeared overhead. Not the ground-based units they had encountered before, but aerial variants designed specifically for reconnaissance. The machines passed directly over their position, their sensors sweeping the area. Down, Ethan hissed, and the group flattened themselves in the water. Most of the drones continued onward, but one circled back, its flight pattern indicating that it had detected something unusual. It's picked up our heat signatures, Celine whispered. It will call in a strike force. Ethan made a split-second decision. Get everyone to the tree line, he ordered Jackson. I'll draw it away. Before anyone could protest, Ethan was moving, bursting from the water, and sprinting along the riverbank in full view of the drone. The machine immediately pivoted to follow him, its sensors locked on his heat signature. Ethan ran with inhuman speed, the Nexari essence powering his muscles beyond normal human limitations. He led the drone away from the group, weaving through the terrain with calculated randomness to prevent it from detecting a pattern. When he had put sufficient distance between himself and the others, he changed tactics. Instead of running from the drone, he turned to face it. The machine hovered 20 meters above him, maintaining its distance while it transmitted his location to its control network. Ethan reached down and picked up a stone from the riverbank. The Nexari consciousness supplied the necessary calculations: trajectory, velocity, compensating for wind resistance. He hurled the stone with precision that would have been impossible for a human. It struck the drone's primary sensor array, cracking the casing. The drone dipped in the air, its flight becoming erratic. Ethan seized the opportunity, grabbing a fallen branch and hurling it like a javelin. The improvised weapon pierced the drone's damaged sensor housing, destroying its ability to track targets. The machine spiraled downward, crash landing on the riverbank. Ethan approached cautiously, then used a rock to smash its communication module before it could transmit a final distress signal. He returned to the group who had reached the safety of the tree line as instructed. They stared at him with expressions ranging from relief to barely concealed fear. The drone has been neutralized, he reported, but we need to move quickly. Its absence will be noted. They continued through the night, pushing the pace until even Ethan could see the exhaustion etched on the civilians' faces. They reached the outskirts of Haven Ridge shortly before dawn on the third day, approaching from the west to avoid the main Krivax advance that was coming from the east. Haven Ridge had once been a thriving city of modern architecture and green spaces. Now it was a fortress, buildings repurposed for defense, barricades erected at strategic points, weapons emplacements visible on rooftops. Even from a distance, Ethan could see the signs of a population preparing for a last stand. There will be sentries, he warned the group. Let me approach first. He moved toward the city's perimeter, hands held open and visible. As expected, he was spotted almost immediately. Armed figures appeared on the nearest barricade, weapons trained on him. That's far enough, a voice called out. Identify yourself. Commander Ethan Marlowe, United Earth Defense Force, he replied. I have civilians with me, scientists from the White Crest Research Facility. There was a pause, then. White Crest fell weeks ago. No survivors were reported. Reports were wrong, Ethan said. We have critical information about the Krivax forces approaching from the east, and about their weaknesses. Another pause, longer this time. Then a new voice, female and authoritative. Let them approach, slowly. Ethan signaled to the others, and they moved forward as a group. As they neared the barricade, he could see that the defenders were a mix of military personnel and civilians with improvised weapons, not unlike his own group, but in far greater numbers. The barricade gate opened, and they were ushered inside. Armed guards surrounded them immediately, not hostile, but certainly wary. A woman stepped forward, tall, with dark hair streaked with gray and the bearing of a career military officer. The insignia on her tactical vest identified her as a colonel. Colonel Rebecca Hayes, Razorback Resistance Command, she introduced herself, her gaze fixed on Ethan with sharp assessment. You said you have information about the Krivax. Yes, Ethan confirmed, but it's complicated. Is there somewhere we can speak privately? Colonel Hayes studied him for a moment longer, then nodded. This way. She led them through the fortified city to what had once been a municipal building, now converted into a military command center. Armed personnel moved with purpose through the corridors, and maps covered the walls of the main room they entered. Now, Colonel Hayes said once they were inside, explain how you survived White Crest and what information you have that's so critical. Dr. Voorhees stepped forward. I'm Dr. Elaine Voorhees, Research Director at White Crest. We were in the containment levels when the attack came. We survived because the Krivax were more interested in destroying specific research than killing everyone. What research? Hayes asked. Dr. Voorhees glanced at Ethan, who nodded slightly. We were studying an alien biological substance, material from a species called the Nexary. Never heard of them, Hayes said flatly. They were here before the Krivax, Celine interjected, stepping forward. All eyes turned to her, many widening at her clearly non-human appearance. My people fought the Krivax for generations before falling to them. I am the last of my kind in physical form. Hayes's hand moved subtly toward her sidearm. And you are? Celine Avarice, she replied, guardian of the Nexary Covenant. Hayes looked back to Ethan. And how does this relate to actionable intelligence about the Krivax? Ethan met her gaze steadily. Because I've integrated with the Nexary essence. I have access to generations of knowledge about the Krivax, their biology, their technology, their tactical doctrines, including how to defeat them. Hayes's expression hardened. You've integrated with alien material? Voluntarily? To survive, Ethan said simply. I was wounded, dying. The essence healed me and gave me capabilities beyond normal human limits. Capabilities we've already used to disrupt a Krivax advance force heading toward this city. That was you? Hayes asked, surprise briefly breaking through her professional demeanor. We picked up the chaos in their communications network when their command unit went down. Yes, Ethan confirmed, and I can help you do more than disrupt them. I can help you defeat the Harbinger they're bringing in. Hayes's eyes narrowed. How do you know about the Harbinger? We intercepted a transmission, Dr. Voorhees explained. And Commander Marlowe's? New knowledge confirmed what it meant. Hayes was silent for a long moment, clearly weighing the situation. Finally, she nodded decisively. A Harbinger vessel is approaching. We need every advantage we can get. She turned to her officers. Prepare for a war council in 30 minutes. When Hayes returned with her command staff, Ethan was already studying their tactical display. The Kryvax formations were visible, but he immediately identified critical blind spots in their intelligence. The Harbinger isn't just another ship, Ethan explained, his voice carrying the weight of ancient Nexary knowledge. It's their neural command center. When it establishes synchronization with ground units, there's a moment of vulnerability, a chance to create a feedback loop that could cripple their entire operation. The skeptical major with Hayes crossed his arms. And we're supposed to trust someone who's been, what, possessed by alien consciousness? Not possessed, Ethan corrected sharply. Integrated. I chose this to fight them more effectively. His intelligence on their formations has been accurate so far, Hayes pointed out, and we've verified the command unit weakness he identified earlier. Ethan laid out his plan with military precision. Synchronized strikes against command units during their neural link establishment, combined with a diversionary attack he would personally lead. Why risk yourself for us? Hayes asked, studying him intently. Ethan's eyes flashed with momentary iridescence. Because I'm still human enough to care what happens to my species, and because the Nexary have a score to settle with the Kryvax. Hayes gave her approval. The operation would commence when the Harbinger arrived in orbit the following day. As preparations were made throughout the day, Ethan found himself approached by one of the resistance fighters, a young woman with short, dark hair and intense eyes. Commander Marlowe, she asked. I'm Lieutenant Julia Reyes. Colonel Hayes assigned me to your diversionary team. Ethan frowned. There is no team. I'm doing the diversion alone. With respect, sir, those aren't my orders, Reyes replied firmly. I'm to accompany you with a squad of our best fighters, 6 total, including myself. It's too dangerous, Ethan insisted. I can't guarantee your safety. None of us have guarantees, Reyes said simply, and Hayes doesn't fully trust you yet. I'm as much an observer as support. Ethan recognized the logic. Hayes was hedging her bets, giving him the opportunity to prove himself while maintaining oversight. Fine, he conceded, but you follow my lead exactly. No heroics, no deviations from the plan. Understood, sir, Reyes replied with a crisp nod. As night fell, Ethan found a quiet corner of the command center to rest. He didn't truly need sleep anymore, another change brought by the Nexary essence, but he valued the opportunity to center himself, to sort through the constant flow of alien knowledge and maintain his sense of identity. He was aware of Celine's approach before she spoke. The resistance fighters fear you, she observed, sitting beside him. They see what you're becoming. And what am I becoming? Ethan asked quietly. Something necessary, Celine replied. A bridge between species, a weapon against our common enemy. Ethan nodded slowly. The voices are stronger here, closer to the surface. They sense the coming battle. They will guide you, Celine assured him. But remember your anchor. Remember what makes you Ethan Marlowe. He thought about that, what defined him beyond his military service, beyond his current role as a weapon against the Kryvax. Memory surfaced. Growing up on a farm in the Midwest, his parents teaching him about responsibility and compassion, joining the military not out of bloodlust, but out of a desire to protect. I remember, he said finally. I won't lose myself in this fight. Dawn brought confirmation that the Harbinger had entered orbit. Resistance sensors detected its massive signature moving into position above the region. On the ground, Kryvax forces began to shift, establishing the communications network that would link them to their orbital command center. In the command center, Colonel Hayes addressed the assembled strike teams. The mission parameters are clear. Team Alpha will target the Eastern Command Node. Team Bravo, the Southern Node. Commander Marlowe's diversion team will draw attention to the west, making the Kryvax think our main assault is coming from that direction. She looked at each of them in turn. Synchronization is critical. The command units must be hit simultaneously when they establish their link to the Harbinger. Too early, and they'll simply establish backup links. Too late, and the link will be too stable to disrupt. Ethan stepped forward. You'll know when to strike. The command units will emit a distinct energy signature when they initiate the synchronization process, a pulsing blue light from their central neural clusters. When that light reaches its peak intensity, that's your moment. The teams dispersed to their designated positions. Ethan led his diversionary squad, Lieutenant Reyes and 5 other fighters, toward the western perimeter of the Kryvax forces. They moved swiftly and silently through the ruins of Haven Ridge's outer districts, avoiding patrols with the help of Ethan's enhanced senses. "This is far enough," Ethan said when they reached a position overlooking the Kryvax lines. "When the signal comes, we hit them hard and fast. Make as much noise as possible. The goal is to draw their response forces away from the command units." "And how do we get out once we've done that?" one of the fighters asked. "We don't engage directly," Ethan explained. "We hit, we run, we hit again. Keep them chasing us." Reyes nodded. "Classic guerrilla tactics." "With one difference," Ethan said. "I'll be the primary target. I'm faster and more durable than any of you. When things get hot, you fall back to the extraction point. I'll keep their attention." Reyes frowned. "That wasn't the plan." "It's always been the plan," Ethan replied quietly. "Just not the one Hayes told you." Before Reyes could argue further, Ethan's comm unit activated. "Harbinger has established geosynchronous orbit," came Hayes' voice. "Command units are beginning preliminary link protocols. Stand by." Ethan scanned the Kryvax lines, his enhanced vision picking out the command units among the regular forces. They were larger than the others, with distinctive sensory arrays and neural processors. Even at this distance, he could see the subtle blue glow beginning to emanate from their central sections. 30 seconds to synchronization," he reported to his team. "Prepare to move." The fighters readied their weapons, a mix of conventional firearms and improvised explosives. Ethan carried only his combat knife and a compact bow with arrows he'd crafted himself. The Nexari consciousness had supplied the design, optimized for penetrating Kryvax vulnerabilities. 15 seconds, Ethan counted down. 10, 5. The blue glow from the command units intensified, pulsing rhythmically. "Now," Ethan ordered, and the diversion team sprang into action. They launched their first volley of explosives into the Kryvax perimeter, creating a series of detonations that ripped through drone units and sent debris flying. Ethan moved with inhuman speed, racing ahead of the others. He drew and fired arrows with perfect precision, each one finding a vulnerable spot in Kryvax armor or circuitry. 3 drones fell in rapid succession, their systems failing catastrophically. The Kryvax response was immediate and overwhelming. Combat units surged toward the attack, their weapons charging. Overhead, aerial drones converged on the area, their sensors scanning for targets. "Fall back to position 2, Ethan commanded, and the team retreated as planned to their second attack position. They unleashed another volley of explosives, this time targeting a cluster of power cells that the Kryvax had established as a forward base. The resulting explosion was far larger than anticipated, engulfing several combat units in a ball of plasma fire. Ethan felt a surge of satisfaction, both his own and from the Nexari consciousness that shared his mind. "Command units are at peak synchronization," Hayes' voice crackled over the comm. "Strike teams moving in." Ethan notched another arrow, aiming for an approaching combat form. The Kryvax warrior was massive, nearly 3 meters tall, with multiple limbs tipped with energy weapons and cutting tools. In its insectoid face, compound eyes glittered with alien intelligence. The arrow found its mark, penetrating the narrow gap between armor plates where neural conduits were exposed. The combat form staggered, then collapsed in a twitching heap. "We've got heavy units incoming," Reyes warned, pointing to the east, where 3 even larger Kryvax warriors were approaching rapidly. "Fall back to the extraction point," Ethan ordered. "I'll hold them here." "That's not the plan," Reyes protested. "It is now," Ethan replied firmly. "Go." "That's an order, Lieutenant." Reyes hesitated, then nodded. "Good luck, Commander." She and the other fighters began their retreat, providing covering fire as they withdrew. Ethan turned to face the approaching Kryvax heavy units. They were elite warriors, the equivalent of special force in human terms. Their armor was thicker, their weapons more powerful, their neural processors more advanced. They moved with coordinated precision that spoke of centuries of combat experience. The Nexari consciousness surged within him, supplying battle strategies and identifying vulnerabilities. Ethan let it guide him, drawing on its ancient enmity toward these creatures. He moved like water, flowing between their attacks with impossible grace. His arrows found joints and sensor arrays, disabling weapons and obscuring vision. When one warrior closed to melee range, Ethan drew his combat knife, the blade flashing as he struck at neural conduits and hydraulic systems. The fight was brutal and swift. Two of the heavy units fell to Ethan's attacks, their systems critically damaged. The third managed to score a glancing hit with an energy weapon, burning a furrow across Ethan's shoulder. The wound sealed almost immediately, the Nexari essence accelerating his healing to inhuman rates. Strike teams report success, Hayes' voice came over the comm. Both command units neutralized. Effect confirmed on the Harbinger. Ethan glanced upward. Even from the ground, he could see the massive orbital vessel shuddering in space, its systems disrupted by the feedback from its destroyed command links. Electrical discharges crawled across its hull, and several sections went dark as power failed. The effect on the ground forces was immediate. The remaining Kryvax units faltered, their coordinated attack patterns dissolving into disorganized individual actions. Some continued to fight, while others withdrew in apparent confusion. Ethan used the opportunity to disengage from the remaining heavy unit and fall back toward the extraction point. As he moved through the ruins, he became aware of another presence nearby. Not Kryvax, but something else, something familiar. He turned to face the presence, knife ready. "Show yourself." A figure stepped from the shadows of a collapsed building. It was humanoid, but clearly not human. Gray skin, similar to Celine's, but darker, stretched over a muscular frame. Eyes glowed with an amber light rather than Celine's green. "Commander Marlowe," the figure said, its voice resonant with harmonics that identified it as Nexari influenced. Or should I say, Nexari vessel. Ethan maintained his defensive stance. "Who are you?" "Commander Arkin, formerly of the United Earth Defense Force Australia Division." The figure inclined its head. "Now something more, as you are." "You've taken the Nexari essence," Ethan realized. It explained the similarities in their transformed appearances. "Not willingly," Arkin replied. "The Kryvax have their own supply, harvested from fallen Nexari. They use it to create specialized warriors to fight against resistance elements. I was captured during the Sydney offensive." "You serve the Kryvax now?" Ethan asked, his grip tightening on his knife. "I serve survival," Arkin corrected, "as do you." "No," Ethan said firmly. "I fight for humanity's survival. You fight for your own." Arkin smiled, a disturbing expression on his transformed features. "And you believe you remain human? That the essence hasn't changed your priorities, your perspective? I can see the transformation in you, Marlowe. It's more advanced than mine, but follows the same path." "I control the essence," Ethan insisted, "not the other way around." "For now, perhaps," Arkin conceded. "But for how long? The voice is never quiet. They never stop pushing for dominance." Before Ethan could respond, Arkin moved with the same inhuman speed that Ethan himself possessed. The attack came from multiple angles, Arkin's body seeming to blur as he struck. Ethan defended instinctively, the Nexari reflexes taking over. The two transformed humans fought with capabilities far beyond normal physical limits, leaping impossible distances, striking with crushing force, recovering from injuries that would have incapacitated ordinary fighters. As they fought, Ethan realized that Arkin's fighting style was familiar, not just from human military training, but from Nexari battle techniques. The same knowledge that guided Ethan's movements guided Arkin's as well. "You see," Arkin said as they grappled, "we draw from the same source. We are becoming the same thing." "No," Ethan growled, breaking free of Arkin's hold. "I haven't surrendered my humanity." "Surrendered?" Arkin laughed. "You threw it away willingly. If you drink this, you will never be human again. She warned you, didn't she? As I was warned, but you drank without hesitation, just as I ultimately accepted to survive." The words struck Ethan like physical blows. There was truth in them. He had chosen this transformation, had embraced the power it offered. But there was also a crucial difference. "I made my choice freely," Ethan said, circling his opponent. "You made yours under duress. That's why you've lost yourself to the essence, and I haven't." Arkin's expression darkened. "You think your will is stronger than mine? That you alone can resist the tide of alien consciousness flooding your mind?" "Not stronger," Ethan replied. "Just differently anchored. I remember who I am, who I choose to be. With that, he attacked again, but this time with a strategy that was uniquely his own, not drawn from necessary battle techniques, but from his human training, combined with the enhanced capabilities the essence provided. It was a hybrid approach that Arkin couldn't anticipate because it didn't exist in the shared necessary knowledge they both accessed. The unexpected strategy gave Ethan the advantage. He drove Arkin back, forcing him to defend against attacks that came from unexpected angles and with unpredictable timing. When Arkin attempted to counter with pure Nexari techniques, Ethan was already shifting to another approach. The fight culminated in a decisive moment. Arkin, frustrated by his inability to predict Ethan's movements, overcommitted to an attack. Ethan sidestepped and drove his knife into a vulnerable point where Arkin's transformed physiology still retained a weakness from its human origin. Arkin staggered back, amber eyes wide with shock. How? Because I remember being human, Ethan said quietly. I remember my weaknesses, and I guard against them. You tried to become something else entirely, and in doing so, you became vulnerable. Arkin fell to his knees, iridescent fluid leaking from his wound. The Harbinger. It's not retreating, he gasped. It's preparing. Final protocol. Ethan's enhanced vision turned skyward. The Harbinger still hung in orbit, its systems clearly damaged from the feedback attack. But rather than withdrawing as expected, it was reconfiguring itself, sections of its hull opening to reveal what Ethan recognized with dread as planetary bombardment systems. Hayes, he said into his comm unit, the Harbinger is preparing an orbital strike. It's going to sterilize the entire region rather than risk losing it. Confirmed, came Hayes' tense reply. Our sensors are picking up massive energy buildups. Evacuation protocols are in effect, but we can't get everyone out in time. Ethan looked back at Arkin, who was slumping further to the ground as his life ebbed away. Is there a way to stop it? He demanded. You were linked to their command structure. You must know something. Arkin's amber eyes flickered. There is one way. The Harbinger's control systems, still vulnerable from your attack. A direct neural interface could disrupt the firing sequence. How? Ethan pressed. There's no way to reach orbit in time. Not physically, Arkin wheezed. Psychically, the Nexari essence can project consciousness across distance with enough power, enough focus. Ethan understood immediately. The Nexari had possessed abilities that transcended physical limitations, abilities that were part of the essence he had consumed. But to project his consciousness to the Harbinger would require channeling the Nexari essence in a way he had deliberately avoided, opening himself fully to its influence. If I do that, he said slowly, if I open myself completely to the essence, you may not come back, Arkin confirmed, his voice fading. Not as yourself. Ethan contacted Hayes again. Colonel, what's the evacuation status? 20% complete, she replied grimly. We need at least 30 minutes more. And according to our sensors, the Harbinger will fire in less than 10. Ethan made his decision. Keep evacuating. I'm going to try something. What are you planning, Commander? Hayes asked. Something desperate, he replied honestly. If it works, you will know. He closed the comm channel and looked once more at Arkin, but the transformed commander had already gone still, his amber eyes dimming to darkness. Ethan found a relatively sheltered position among the ruins and sat cross-legged on the ground. He closed his eyes and, for the first time since his transformation, deliberately reached for the Nexari consciousness that shared his mind. Instead of holding it at bay or selectively accessing specific knowledge, he opened himself fully to it. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. The voices that had been a background murmur rushed to the forefront of his awareness. Thousands of distinct consciousnesses suddenly presented in realm. Memories not his own flooded his perception. Cities of crystal and light, battles among the stars, knowledge accumulated over millennia of civilization. Ethan felt his sense of self beginning to dissolve, his identity as Ethan Marlowe becoming just one thread in a vast tapestry of consciousness. With his last coherent thought, he focused on his purpose: to stop the Harbinger, to save Haven Ridge, to protect what remained of humanity. The Nexari consciousness responded to that purpose, coalescing around it. Techniques for projecting awareness beyond physical limitations surfaced from the collective knowledge. Ethan, or what had been Ethan, felt his perception expanding outward, rising from the ruined city, extending into the sky, reaching toward the massive vessel in orbit. The Harbinger loomed in his expanded awareness, a construct of metal and energy pulsing with alien intelligence. He could perceive its internal systems, the damage from the earlier attack, and the preparations for the planetary strike that would annihilate everything below. He extended his consciousness into the vessel's control systems, seeking the vulnerabilities that Arkin had mentioned. The Kryvak's defenses responded immediately, alien algorithms attempting to isolate and destroy the intrusion. But the Nexarate consciousness that now guided him knew these defenses, had encountered them across centuries of conflict. The battle was not physical, but informational, a clash of opposing intelligences in a realm of pure data and energy. The Nexarate consciousness flowed around Kryvak's defenses, found pathways through security protocols, and penetrated to the core of the Harbinger's command structure. There, at the heart of the vessel, Ethan found what he was seeking, under eye tweaking, the control sequence for the planetary bombardment. With precisely targeted disruptions, he began to corrupt the firing protocols, introducing cascading errors that spread through the system. The Harbinger's intelligence fought back with increasing desperation, rerouting functions, isolating systems, attempting to preserve its primary mission. But the Nexarate consciousness was relentless, following each adaptation with a new attack vector, exploiting vulnerabilities faster than they could be protected. In orbit, the Harbinger's external weapon ports began to close as their control systems failed. Power surges rippled through the vessel as command pathways crossed and conflicted. Secondary systems shut down to preserve core functions, but even these were compromised by the Nexarate intrusion. On the ground, observers watched in amazement as the massive ship visibly shuddered in orbit. Sections of its hull went dark, while others flared with uncontrolled energy discharges. Then, slowly at first, but with increasing speed, the Harbinger began to move, breaking from its geosynchronous position and climbing to a higher orbit. In the realm of consciousness, Ethan felt the Kryvak's command intelligence making a final decision, to retreat rather than risk complete destruction. The vessel's remaining functional systems were rerouting all available power to its propulsion systems, abandoning the planetary strike mission in favor of preservation. As the Harbinger retreated, Ethan began the difficult process of withdrawing his projected consciousness. The Nexarate essence resisted, drawn to the conflict, reluctant to disengage. Ethan felt himself stretching thinner, his identity fragmenting as his awareness remained split between his physical body and the retreating vessel. With a supreme effort of will, he focused on his corporeal form, the sensation of breath, the weight of his body, the texture of the ground beneath him. Slowly, painfully, his consciousness contracted, pulling back from the vast expanse it had occupied and returning to the confines of his transformed body. When Ethan opened his eyes, he found Celine kneeling before him, her luminous green eyes studying him with concern. "You succeeded," she said softly. "The Harbinger has withdrawn. Haven Ridge is safe for now." Ethan tried to speak but found his voice uncooperative. When he finally managed words, they came out in a language he shouldn't have known, the ancient tongue of the Nexarate. He closed his eyes again, focusing on his human identity, forcing his mind to organize itself around the core of who he had been. "I almost didn't come back," he finally said in English. The essence, it wanted to stay engaged with the Harbinger, to follow it, to destroy it completely. "But you did come back," Celine observed. "That shows remarkable strength of will." Ethan nodded slowly. "Not just will, purpose." He looked toward the city where evacuation transports were still departing despite the immediate threat having passed. "I had something to return for." Celine helped him to his feet. His body felt strange to him now, simultaneously more his own and less so. The transformation had advanced during his full engagement with the Nexarate essence. His skin now showed distinct patterns of iridescence, and his eyes had taken on more of the luminous quality that characterized Celine's. "What happens now?" he asked. "The Harbinger is gone, but the Kryvaks will return. They always do." "Now we prepare," Celine replied. "The Resistance has seen what is possible with the knowledge you possess. They will want to learn, to adapt, to develop new strategies." "And me?" Ethan asked. "What do I become now?" "That," Celine said, "remains your choice. as it has been from the moment I offered you the essence. You are neither fully human nor fully Nexari. You exist in the space between, a bridge between species. They made their way back to Haven Ridge, where they found a city transformed not just by the recent battle, but by new purpose. The successful defense against the Kryvax had given the resistance something they had lacked for months: hope. Colonel Hayes met them at the command center, her expression a mix of relief and wary respect. Whatever you did, Commander, it worked. The Harbinger has left our solar system entirely, according to our long-range sensors. It will return, Ethan warned, with reinforcements. This was just one battle in a much longer war. Hayes nodded. I know, but you've given us time to prepare, to evacuate our civilians to safer locations, to consolidate our forces. She studied him with calculating eyes. And you've demonstrated capabilities we never imagined possible. Capabilities that could change the course of this war. What are you suggesting? Ethan asked, though he already suspected the answer. I want you to train others, Hayes said directly. Teach us what you know about the Kryvax. Help us develop strategies to fight them effectively. Ethan considered the request. The knowledge he possessed could indeed help humanity survive against the Kryvax onslaught. But that knowledge came at a price. The blurring of identity, the constant struggle to maintain his sense of self against the tide of alien consciousness. I can teach you about their tactics, their technology, their vulnerabilities, he said carefully. But the transformation I've undergone, I wouldn't recommend it to others. The risk of losing oneself is too great. Hayes nodded, accepting his assessment. Then we'll work with what we have. Your knowledge and Silen's experience, combined with our human determination. In the days that followed, Ethan embraced his new role as advisor to the Resistance. The transformation continued within him. His skin occasionally shimmered with subtle iridescence. His eyes held the faint luminescence of the Nexari. Yet his mind remained his own, a delicate balance maintained through sheer determination. One evening, as he stood on the walls of Haven Ridge, watching the sunset, Celine joined him silently. The Resistance fighters no longer fear you, she observed. They look to you for guidance, for inspiration. Not me, Ethan replied. What I represent, the possibility that humanity can survive this, can adapt and overcome even against a superior force. Is that not what you intended when you drank the essence, Celine asked, to become a symbol of resistance? Ethan considered the question. No, he said finally. When I drank it, I was just trying to survive, to live long enough to fight another day. He looked out at the horizon where the sky still bore the scars of Kryvax orbital bombardments. But now I'm fighting for something larger, for a future where humans and Nexari consciousness can coexist, where the best of both can create something neither could achieve alone. A bridge between worlds, Celine said, echoing her earlier description. Yes, Ethan agreed. Not human, not alien, but something new, something necessary. As darkness fell and stars appeared in the sky, stars that might hold both threats and possibilities, Ethan reflected on the words Celine had spoken when she first offered him the essence. If you drink this, you will never be human again. She had been right, but she hadn't told him the full truth. He was no longer simply human, but he hadn't lost his humanity. Instead, he had expanded it, encompassing a larger understanding of what it meant to exist in this universe of countless species and possibilities. The Kryvax will return, he said quietly, and when they do, they'll find us waiting. Not just humans, not just Nexari, but something they've never encountered before. Something they don't know how to defeat. Celine's luminous green eyes met his. And what is that, Commander Marlowe? Ethan smiled, feeling both his human determination and the ancient Nexari resolve flowing through him in perfect harmony. Hope, he said simply. Adaptability. The refusal to surrender even when the odds seem impossible. He looked up at the stars, knowing that somewhere out there, the Kryvax were regrouping, planning their return. But for the first time since the invasion had begun, he felt something beyond mere survival instinct driving him forward. He felt purpose. They'll come back, he repeated, and we'll be ready.